We are back with more NFL recaps for the divisional round. And, naturally, with the progression of a typical playoff campaign, you want games to be much more competitive and thrilling, seeing as in the right context, you do have the best 8 teams and the best 4 in each conference remaining. It definitely lived up to its billing for the most part. But we'll start out with the first game on Saturday between the Texans and the Chiefs. And it looked, honestly, like it was going to get out of hand within the very first play. I mean, you get Remigio getting a very great kickoff return. And, he's running. He's found in the right lane, and he gets the angle he needs to get a whole bunch of yardage. And then he gets in a spot where Boyd actually happens to make a play on the football, forcing Remigio to fumble. It bounces right back into the hands of Samaje Perine. So, not only is there a situation where you have a kickoff return like that going in favor of the Chiefs already, but it's made even worse because after he forces the fumble, I guess Boyd just takes himself out of the play completely and decides to go celebrate early for whatever context. Now, it looked with the initial angle that he shoved his special teams coordinator just out of the blue and got all riled up. It looked bad originally, but I guess later on there were reports that he came out and said that he was just celebrating the play call. I think in either context, it doesn't really paint him in the best light. I mean, he thought that they got the ball back, but in reality, you are that close to making a play, you should be trying to pick up the ball and truly involve yourself in the play rather than just thinking anything is guaranteed in a playoff setting, but that's neither here nor there. All that within just a single play, not even a few seconds into the ball game. It was looking like it was going to turn into just absolute chaos for them. Luckily for them, Texans defense, and this would be the case for most of the ball game, they decided to show up. I mean, even with that penalty, getting the Chiefs in the red zone without even having to run any offensive play, they would eventually end up losing a single yard while not getting any of their passes completed, and they would have to settle for a field goal. The Texans would go down the field with the help of very good plays from Dalton Schultz getting 34 yards, and eventually Nico Collins picking up a third down with a 13-yard gain to extend their drive. You would see the Texans take off 5 minutes and 17 seconds and get a field goal to tie up the score. The Chiefs would get the ball back and they would get back to their bread and butter, really. I mean, you get a solid Isaiah Pacheco run to start out. There would be a duel of penalties on back-to-back third down plays, I should say. Jawan Taylor, there's something wrong with this dude, man. Is one of the most penalized tackles, if not the most penalized tackle, since 2023, I believe. The fact that they gave him the contract they gave him is quite absurd in retrospect now. You just have to see how he truly operates on the field. It's ridiculous. Every other game, it's him getting into a situation where he's holding for whatever reason, and on this particular instance, it was a false start. Of course it is. And granted, you feel like given the way that he tries to time it up, they would call more of them. But they got him there. That forces the Chiefs back deep, where on 3rd and 8, you would have Mahomes try to get a pass going to Kelsey, and he would get sacked or have a sack attempt by Will Anderson Jr. They would call it roughing the passer, and initially, I thought it was the right call. It looked as though his head was hit by Will Anderson Jr.'s helmet. But upon, replay assist, I guess, you can't necessarily challenge a play like this, but they replayed it over and over again to try to see what was happening. And they probably could have picked up the flag, honestly. It's not the most egregious one I've seen. They could have let it stand, but in any context, as controversial as that was, they would let it go on, it would extend the drive, and Mahomes would instantly get a Travis Kelce catch for 23 yards, just running down the sideline with relative ease. Then he would get, after an incomplete pass to DeAndre Hopkins, who was really a non-factor in this game, surprisingly, would get it out to Xavier Worthy, made it pretty damn good contested catch, adjusting to the ball in that way while working on Eric Murray, and he would be getting in the Houston red zone there, deep in the Houston red zone, with a go-to-go opportunity. They tried to feed him again, and Will Anderson Jr. would tackle him with a single arm. Eventually, after another sack here, the Chiefs would have to kick yet another field goal. That's back-to-back drives where, things could have ended in absolute disaster. And yes, this specific call from the refs wasn't necessarily optimal for the Texans, but they didn't really let it hurt them too much. The Texans would then get the ball back, and CJ Stroud would have to deal with quite the scenario to start out. I mean, it was going smoothly for a little while. You'd get a good first down conversion for Nico Collins for 14 yards. They would stall out a little bit, and then he would be sacked on 3rd and long by none other than Chris Jones. And after that specific play, you would have CJ Stroud continue to limp off the football field because the pressure was already getting to him that much. Texans O-line was not doing an optimal job of protecting him, and it's safe to say that with the way things panned out, pretty much the theme of the game, honestly. Texans defense, even with that, continued to hold despite the best efforts of Patrick Mahomes trying to extend the drive with a 15-yard run for first down. They would stall out and have to punt the ball yet again here. The Texans had a chance to respond. It looked like with a few contributions from Joe Mixon and also C.J. Stroud on a bad knee to this point or being battered up a little bit, he would get outside the pocket on 3rd and long and get a 28-yard run, actually running over a couple of guys to extend the yardage and get them inside Kansas City's territory. But yet again, similar fate here as Shaq Mason on 3rd and manageable this time would allow his quarterback to get sacked yet again, this time by Charles Omenihu, former Texan, ironically enough. that says something. Then, to add even more insult to literal injury here, you would have Kaimi Fairbairn miss a field goal wide to the right. Now, yes, it was windy out there. It was slated to be that way. And my take on that was, like Kaimi Fairbairn's accustomed to playing in a dome stadium. So to an extent, I get it. But that's certainly a possession that the Texans would want back. The very next one would see Kansas City have a pretty short field to work with. And instantly, they got down to business. I mean, on second down, you would have Travis Kelce take it back to some vintage playoff performances for him. I mean, he was going out here and just running past everybody. He shakes off Miles Bryant. He breaks a tackle attempt from Azeez Al-Shire. And eventually, Henry To'oTo'o would get him at the 6-yard line. He would have scored a touchdown on that in younger years, but that's besides the point. In any context, it's still a play that stands out because they would detail that it was his longest catch of the season, and it was also the longest catch that he had in his playoff career. Interestingly enough, as accomplished as he is in the playoffs, it's well documented. I thought he would have had a longer catch than that at this point. Probably in like years past. Obviously, some of the more recent games in the 2020s have seen him just carve up a defense in shorter yardage situations where he's getting productive gains, picking up first downs, extending drives, and eventually sealing games with his play. But no play like that in that time span. They would then try to run it straight in, and eventually, after Xavier Worthy got them down to the 1-yard line with a pseudo rushing play, Kareem Hunt would help them get in, and they would extend the lead to a 13-3 ball game. From here on out, the Texans would start to do things correctly a little bit. I mean, yes, they were still suffering from relegating CJ Stroud to being the Chiefs' ragdoll and punching bag time and again, despite the likes of John Mechie III getting very good passes from him in tight space for a combined 35 yards. Still end up losing it and eventually be forced to kick a field goal here. But including this drive and the drive to open up the third quarter, the Texans would have the football for the next 2 minutes in 44 seconds of game time. Outside of a play where it's the end of the half and the Chiefs just kneel it. I'm not really counting that. 14 minutes. We talk about these games coming down to controlling the ball and protecting the football. When you look at what the Texans were able to do in 14 minutes and 44 seconds of possession, they did their job. You know what the Chiefs are capable of and how they can win in multiple ways. Like a Swiss Army knife on the other side awaiting you. They can beat you in any way possible. Your game plan is to keep that offense off of the field and wear down that defense. You add in the fact that you get points on the board to end off the first half, and then you come into the second half and you take 10 minutes and 24 seconds off the clock with a good amount of first down conversions for Joe Mixon on this drive, with CJ Stroud taking it upon himself to make plays to extend the drive. And even with their ability to overcome some of their own self-imposed errors. I mean, you had Dalton Schultz get a false start, and then you had Dameon Pierce come in and lose yardage, but they would get almost all of that back quickly. You would have CJ Stroud on a different third down, get it out to Nico Collins for a 12-yard gain. Dalton Schultz, offensive pass interference, they would make light work of that, and eventually they would get themselves in a third and 5 situation after yet another penalty, this time by Irv Smith Jr., yet CJ Stroud, like the quarterback we know he can be, puts it all on his shoulders And despite being as banged up as he is, he still gets a 6-yard gain to pick up yet another first down. Finally, with a worn-out defense and a pretty motivated Texans offense, Joe Mixon punches it in for the touchdown that could have supposedly tied up the ball game, if not for more kicking woes taking place, because you do all that hard work to at least ensure that you tie up the ball game. And the offense did their part, but for whatever fucking reason, Fairbairn did not. He would miss the PAT. It's just rough. And it was that kind of ball game when you get down to the end of this. You need to make those plays in the crucial moments. And to an extent, in this specific period of time, offense absolutely did that. And you just could not fully capitalize on it. You can't afford that against a team like the Chiefs, because the very next possession would then see Patrick Mahomes continue to make his own plays to put the Chiefs in better position to win the ball game. I mean, yet another first down to Travis Kelce, followed up by a play on which he fumbled, then got the ball back while trying to run it behind his lineman patiently, and he would cut back in and be tackled very short of the line of gain. But there would be a penalty thrown on Henry To'oTo'o for unnecessary roughness. This was yet another penalty that was hotly contested, as again, to the naked eye, it looks like Mahomes is giving himself up and he's a defenseless runner being hit illegally by the defense. But again, upon further review, it is yet another penalty that probably could have just been thrown to the wayside in a situation where they could have picked the flag up yet again. I mean, Folorenzo Fatukasi and Henry To'oTo'o actually managed to run into each other more so than they land a hit on Patrick Mahomes here. You know, everybody's going to have their own theory about it, and everybody's going to have their own opinion about it. But again, regardless of it, the game still had to be played, and they still had to at least try to capitalize off of these supposed mistakes. It would take a little while, some dinking and some dunking. They would get on a crucial fourth down where they would have Kareem Hunt get a 3-yard run to take even more time off the clock, opening up the fourth quarter and maintaining possession. Then you would see Travis Kelce get involved completely. You would have an 18-yard gain on this drive to pick up yet another first down, getting yards after the catch and getting them deep into Houston's red zone, putting them in a goal-to-go situation. Now, they would have a penalty that would push them back 5 yards, so now this was going to become much more difficult. That was compounded on with a sack by Will Anderson Jr., who, again, even with things playing out the way they did, had a tremendous game. They would put Mahomes under pressure on both of these ensuing plays. And while they would get him in the first one, all it took was a little magic in the second one, and great fucking things happened, to be completely honest. I mean, literally, you had Mario Edwards Jr. trying to get him. And he almost sacked him, but as he was falling down to the ground, off platform, he got it off and threw it perfectly to Travis Kelce, just standing in the end zone, waiting for it as all of this other chaos was unfolding. I mean, quite literally, Azeez Al-Shire was trying to dive for the ball and swat it that man was so late on it. And by that point, Chiefs would have an 8-point lead. The Texans had to keep a similar pace. Now, the defense that had been playing so well did manage to break this one time. But the offense at least owed it to them to respond rather quickly. And their drive was quick, but it didn't produce much of anything. Despite getting a 24-yard catch from Nico Collins on Trent McDuffie, ironically enough, who had been doing a decent job of containing him for most of the match, they had incomplete pass after incomplete pass, including this third down where Justin Reed took it upon himself to deflect the pass that was fired off rather quickly due to the sheer amount of pressure. With that came a 4th and long on the KC 40-yard line, and I understood the decision to go for it, to be quite honest. Fairbairn had been struggling. The conditions were too inclement to try a field goal from that range, despite him hitting multiple 59-yarders this season. It just was not the play to really put him in that position at this point in time. You had to go for it. But even then, it seemed like their sense of urgency wasn't there at all. They get the ball off in time somehow without even having a chance to truly reset or anything like that. And eventually, it gets blown up by the likes of George Karlaftis yet again, who also had a game in his respect right as well. The Chiefs would then punt the ball, but again, it's a stolen possession because the Texans could not capitalize on these opportunities. Similar case here. They get a decent run from Joe Mixon, but throw back-to-back incomplete passes. That forced them to punt the ball again, giving the Chiefs yet another possession where all they had to do was draw the possession out a little bit. And ultimately, they would kick a field goal to give themselves a 23-12 lead. To C.J. Stroud's credit, when push came to shove, despite George Karlaftis trying to impose his will yet again, they would ultimately pick up the yardage they needed on multiple occasions to at least give themselves an opportunity to score before the 2-minute warning. It didn't happen because of the likes of Felix and DK Uzomah getting back there and pressuring him yet again like they had been the entire night. I kid you not. 3rd and 10 would see the same story where Karlaftis got yet another sack. But at the very least, you could come away with points here. You would just have to kick a field goal and hope for an onside kick. Fairbairn, being in range this time, in quite the unfortunate day for him, that might be the understatement of the century as well, he quite literally gets his field goal kick blocked by Leo Chenal. Though Justin Reed also got back in there and tried to make a play on it, but he was picked up with a single arm. Either way, it made things just unlikely for the Texans. At that point, the game ended. You couldn't really make something happen from there. And not to mention, too, that this would see C.J. Stroud get even more banged up to where he was barely moving out there. I mean, after getting sacked 8 times in a game like this, and not to mention that some of them motherfuckers was hitting hard, you're naturally going to feel that as a quarterback. And again, as rough as that is for C.J. Stroud, it's a reflection on where this O-line is truly. Because your franchise quarterback shouldn't be in that kind of spot. In this type of football game where, to be honest, and I'll get to the numbers in a little bit, he did not perform bad. He really did not have a terrible game. He played fine. And it just goes to waste. The Chiefs would take an intentional safety to bleed time off the clock, and the Texans would then have to take a knee. And he could barely get down CJ Stroud to even take the knee. So at that point, they had to just concede. The Chiefs would win this game 23-14, with Mahomes passing for just 177 yards and a touchdown. Kareem Hunt would lead all of their rushers with 44 rushing yards on the ground and a touchdown, while Travis Kelce would set precedent with his performance, as his 7 receptions, 117 yards, and a touchdown would give him the 9th such playoff game in his career with over 100 receiving yards, putting him over Jerry Rice for the most games all time. He also would catch the reception that would grant him the top spot for receptions in a postseason career, and he also ranks second in receiving yards and touchdowns, with his 20th being caught in this matchup. Andy Reid would also set precedent with this victory, becoming the 4th head coach with 300 combined regular season and postseason victories, along with the likes of Don Shula, Bill Belichick, and also George Halas. And it was a damn rewarding one. The Chiefs go to their 7th consecutive AFC Championship Game appearance. All of them coming in seasons where Mahomes was the starting quarterback. That says just a lot about the continuity they have there, and just the culture of winning that they've bred over the past few years. As for the Texans, again, CJ Stroud, literally 245 yards passing, 67.9% completion as well, 42 rushing yards on the ground. Not a terrible game at all. Joe Mixon had a solid performance as well, 88 yards on 18 carries and a touchdown. And Nico Collins had 5 receptions for 81 yards, along with Dalton Schultz getting 4 receptions for 63 yards. But by the end of it, again, they would severely miss Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs. No doubt about that. Still, you have to play with what you have, quite literally. And I just am confused, with that being said, about the approach, the stance that they're taking after the game. I mean, quite literally, you have multiple players out there, and even DeMeco Ryans alluding to referees dictating the outcome of this game. And just they're dying on the hill that they lost this game because of the referees. And I'm like, yes, okay, a couple of the calls were controversial, and the Texans did have more penalties and penalty yardage. But at the end of the day, you were the team that, you were the team that shriveled up in the big moments. You did most everything right. You protected the football. This is a clean game by both teams. Neither team turned the ball over. You had more time of possession and ball control. You outgained them. You had more yards per play. You ran more plays. You were 10 of 17 on third down. So you were finding a way to extend these drives as well. But when push came to shove, you were ineffective in the red zone. You missed multiple field goals on special teams. You allowed a gashing kick return to open up the ball game. And most glaringly, you allowed CJ Stroud to get sacked 8 times. 8 different times. 3 for Karlaftis. 1 for Connor out of the cornerback position. 1 for Charles Omenihu. 1 for Chris Jones. 1 for Felix Anudike-Uzomah. And 1 for Tershawn Wharton. 8 sacks is not going to help you even remotely win ball games. It's always going to be a detriment because you're consistently getting behind schedule and off of your play script. So where you have to adjust and do something very out of character. Of course you're going to get desperate at that point. And that is something that is on you. Texans had a few calls go their way as well. It's not like these penalties were the determining factor of the game. All of the true ones that stood out here derive from self-imposed mistakes that the Texans made consistently, especially when it comes to their lack of protection up front. And this should be an insight into how important it is to truly find staples at these positions, especially blindside tackle. Of course, that's why it's so valued. And they've got to reevaluate how they construct the rest of this O-line. Laramie Tunsil has also regressed, but I feel like he would be retained. Some of the other talent they have up there just don't produce consistently enough. And that's a looming question for them as they enter the offseason. Now, moving on to the Commanders-Lions game. This game was pretty fucking great, to be completely honest with you. I mean, it started out with the Lions punting the football on a 3-and-out. Pretty anticlimactic. You have the Commanders also drop down a little bit. Austin Eckler was making some plays right off the rip, getting a 24-yard catch. But ultimately, after a 13-yard one by Jamison Crowder, they would be in a 4th-and-1 situation inside Detroit's 30-yard line. And again, a matchup of 4th downs this is going to be. I said it time and again before the game and during this game even. Quite literally. You have the most efficient team on 4th down conversions in the league in the Commanders this season. And you also have the team with the highest amount of converted 4th downs and overall attempts in the Lions. It was going to be important when it came to who was going to make those pivotal conversions at the right times. The Commanders would try it immediately. They had a play where Mariota was supposed to come in and I guess pitch it back to Jayden Daniels, who was in the backfield. So Mariota gets the ball from the snap, and he was trying to pitch it back, but I don't believe that Brian Robinson Jr. was on the same page here. And you could tell when you watch the playback, he just got in the way of them directly, offering them no chance and allowing Muhammad to get in and make the tackle to keep them short of the line of game. The Lions would get the ball right back, and they would instantly start feeding their star players. I mean, Jameson Williams got fed. You had Jahmyr Gibbs making multiple moves in space because the teams still decided to leave him unaccounted for out of the backfield, allowing for a 23-yard catch to push them even further into Washington's territory, where it was really just all rushing from that point with a solid effort from David Montgomery to pick up a first down. But ultimately, Jahmyr Gibbs would get the touchdown here to start the scoring for the game. Now, the Commanders would get the ball right back, and ultimately, you would have them drive down just a little bit with the help of Terry McLaurin and also Jamison Crowder picking up first downs. Now, Brian Robinson Jr. would maintain this, but after that, Jayden Daniels would throw 3 consecutive incomplete passes to then force themselves into a field goal that would make the score 7-3. Lions get the ball right back. And they do eventually get down the field easily. I mean, a Sam Laporta catch was then followed up by a very long Jahmyr Gibbs run for 33 yards. They would get themselves into a 3rd-and-1 situation rather swiftly inside Washington's red zone, where Dorrance Armstrong would manage to get around to Jared Goff and force a strip sack, which was then recovered by Frankie Luvu, spotting the Commanders of possession and starting the streak of absolute sloppiness for the Lions, to be completely honest with you. I'm not going to lie. Nonetheless, you would have them make very swift work of this, as Dyami Brown would eventually get a 42-yard catch off of a good pass from Jayden Daniels here. Eventually, they got themselves in a spot where they could just keep everything simple, protect the football, but make sure that you're moving forward every single time rather than taking steps back. So they would get a couple of short runs and then eventually get themselves on 4th and 3. This one would be converted as Zach Ertz would get a 7-yard gain. Then they had 3 plays on the Detroit 2-yard line to make something happen. They were bailed out on the very 3rd with a defensive pass interference from Kirby Joseph interfering with Terry McLaurin. A bit of a debatable one, but they're normally going to call that when the trajectory of the receiver's path is altered by something of a physical nature. They're going to do that. You have to expect that as a defender. They would then have another chance with an automatic first down, where within 2 plays, Brian Robinson Jr. would get it up the gut for a 2-yard touchdown run. And after that possession, the Lions would respond. Amon-Ra St. Brown would eventually get a 34-yard catch, and then Khalif Raymond would also take it upon himself to convert another first down for them before Jared Goff, while falling down, managed to do a similar thing to Patrick Mahomes. Only this was a little different. Sam Laporta wasn't necessarily standing still. He was on the move. And the play had to be made, so he took it upon himself to dive out for the ball, take one hand, and reel that motherfucker in for the touchdown to give the Lions the lead. A very impressive catch by him, and it also ended up making SportsCenter's #1 spot on their top 10 list. That's how good the play was. In just a short time, though, that wouldn't come to matter. You would have them continuing to keep things short and simple, where after a Dyami Brown 9-yard catch saw them get a first down, they try a screen pass to none other than the Ohio State man in Terry McLaurin, and he would take it all the way to the house for a 58-yarder, getting past the likes of Kirby Joseph and giving the Commanders a 3-point lead. Got from bad to worse instantly, as Jared Goff would throw up a fuck you ball that ended up, getting his team fucked over, as it was intercepted by Quan Martin. And he got a pick 6, giving the Commanders a 24-14 lead. Now, something very important what happened on this play, I will say. As, Jared Goff, as slow as he is, was trying to make the tackle to prevent the touchdown. And the Commanders were not having that shit. Frankie Louvu sees him trying to make a play, and he lights his ass up. Knocks him down to the ground like a fucking dummy. But on that hit, made full-on contact with the ground as he went head first back into it. And that's usually cause for concern when it comes to how these concussions are seen and accounted for in today's league. You don't want to see a person taking a fall like that. And anytime something like that does happen, they're instantly getting checked. So Jared Goff would be taken back into the tent for concussion protocol purposes. They would be getting the ball back within just a few seconds, honestly. So they had to do something. In for this current time came Teddy Bridgewater to just try to manage the football game, keep them in it. Surely enough, he didn't have to do much. I mean, you would get a Jahmyr Gibbs 14-yard run instantly after he got a false start penalty. Picked all that yardage right back up. Then Teddy Bridgewater got a very aggressive check down to him for just a 3-yard gain. Yes, aggressive check down, but again, you're not asking him to do too much. You're not asking him to throw the football deep. You just want to make sure that if you can, you chip away as much time as possible to prevent the Commanders from continuing to do this to your vaunted defense. And I mean, I guess while this play is cool, I feel as though it probably would have been a lot wiser to try to draw this thing out rather than giving the Commanders offense another shot before the end of the half to get points on the board. In any context, they would get a trick play to Jameson Williams, who would then rip and run over the field. He would take it all the way to the left, cut it right back out over the middle of the field, and eventually get in for a touchdown from 61 yards out on a rushing play. That was a reverse. He would celebrate his way all the way to the end zone from about the 20-yard line because he's just that fast, doing a similar celebration to Deshaun Jackson, and then he would start humping the ground. He humped the ground twice. Luckily for him, he didn't do it a third time. Either way, he's going to face a fine. There's no doubt about that. It was so bad. They would replay the entire play and then on the broadcast recognizing what happened because, you have sponsors accounting for this, all the money invested in the league and things like that. They're not going to continue to promote different shit if you got stuff like that going on. So they had the fastest cutaways ready to prevent anybody from seeing that again. Definitely a hilarious moment. But again, the turns tabled pretty fast with that. I mean, you left the Commanders an optimal amount of time to make something else happen. And they would do that. Is Jayden Daniels will get a 15-yard run and then eventually throw another dime of a fucking pass to De'Ami Brown. A rainbow shot over Kirby Joseph trying to deflect the pass and time it perfectly, but he couldn't because it was thrown in the quintessential spot for a wide receiver to go and get that pass. And it was damn near a pass that was thrown off of his back foot. Jayden Daniels doing a great job protecting the football and also knowing when to be aggressive. Like, quite literally. You wouldn't think that pass would have a chance to be completed if it's any other quarterback there in most situations. There are a few other quarterbacks you trust with it, but the fact that Jayden Daniels could place himself in that position and come out on top as a rookie, that says something. Eventually, Zach Ertz would get in from 5 yards out to make it a 31-21 ball game. The Lions did have another chance, as dynamic of an offense as they are. They were given another shot to do enough to at least keep this game competitive, give yourself some momentum going into the half. They drove for a little bit But eventually, Jared Goff would throw yet another untimely interception, this time to Mike Sandersill. And that would end off the half. To their credit, the Lions defense, as vaunted as they are, can't say that enough, they would force the Commanders to punt the football. And this is despite allowing the Commanders to go ham in the second quarter. I mean, combined, this was the most prolific single quarter in a playoff game in NFL history, with 42 combined points between both squads. Jayden Daniels had the most offensive yards by a rookie since Andrew Luck in a playoff game, and he did this all in one half. And it was the first such game with 600 or more total yards in the first half since Super Bowl 52. A lot was on the line, and it was important for them to make sure that they give the offense a fighting shot to compete. They did exactly that, and the offense will reward them with an 11-play, 91-yard drive that saw them take 5 minutes and 56 seconds off the clock, getting some solid runs from both Montgomery and Gibbs, getting 19-yard catches and then 20-yard catches from Amon-Ra St. Brown before they would get in the Commanders' red zone, where Jahmyr Gibbs would take an 8-yard run up the middle for a touchdown to make it a 31-28 ball game. We would have them get into the fourth quarter here, where the Commanders would take their drive to do as much damage. Anything the Lions could do, they felt that they could do better, and they were going to let people tell them otherwise, to be completely honest with you. They just imposed their will. 3rd and 1. Brian Robinson Jr. gets the first down. 4th and 2. Jayden Daniels fakes it and gets a first down, completely fooling Terrion Arnold. A 4th down attempt saw them catch the Lions sleeping completely. They would have too many men on the field. That extended the drive yet again. With multiple plays inside the 2-yard line now, the good play of Brian Robinson Jr. would display itself yet again as he would get another 1-yard touchdown, making him the first Commanders running back to have 2 or more scrimmage touchdowns in a playoff game since Stephen Davis in 1995, I believe. Very good historical mark for him. Then even more dumb stuff happened for the Lions here, because they would start out just fine. It would get a 22-yard catch and run from Tim Patrick to get them near Commanders' territory past midfield, but they just wanted to do too many trick plays. Now, granted, the last one worked, in which on the very first drive of their second half, Amon-Ra St. Brown would actually take it upon himself to get a rush in of sorts. It counted as a pass, but David Montgomery would get the handoff, the pitch from Jared Goff, and he would complete a shovel pass to David Montgomery. Or he would complete a shovel pass to Amon-Ra St. Brown, picking up a smooth little 20 yards and extending that drive. Trick plays like that were effective earlier on, but it felt like being down by 10 points to run too many and rely on them was not going to be a recipe for success. And especially in plays where you were getting other skill position players to potentially throw the football deeper than acceptable, to be honest. And that's exactly where they would find themselves here. They would get it to Jameson Williams, trying to get him to throw the football down the field, and he would throw it in the double coverage to Jahmyr Gibbs. and it was promptly intercepted by none other than Mike Borgonzi again, spotting the Commanders another free possession to work with, and they took full advantage, getting down the field within 4 minutes and 33 seconds to eventually get Jeremy McNichols the 1-yard rushing touchdown that would likely seal the deal here. I mean, the Lions would try to fight back. They would try, ultimately settling for a field goal to make it a 2-possession ball game. They got a little lucky with the Commanders driving down and having to settle for a field goal that was missed from 44 yards out by Zane Gonzalez, with a chance to at least make it a 1-possession ball game, as unlikely as it was going to be for the Lions to get 2 touchdowns on the board in 2 minutes and 26 seconds while getting an onside kick sandwiched in between that was going to be difficult. And I was even thinking that if they were somehow able to pull that off, that it would be best for them to go for it. I mean, think about it at this point. In the perfect scenario, you're facing that reality. It would be optimal for the Lions to have gone for it in that context if it was a 45-44 ball game without a lot of time left on the clock and you have the game on the line. Because let's be honest, you know at this point, and granted your offense hadn't been living up to playing to their A-game potential all night long, but you knew that you were going to have to play a perfect brand of ball on that side to at least mask those defensive problems for the time being. When they flared up like this, you figured on that side that you had to at least match some of what the Commanders were able to do. And to their credit, they did that for a decent amount, but turnovers killed them. Nonetheless, if you protect the ball here, you get an onside kick, you get another favorable possession, you get it down to just a single point, and there isn't a lot of time left, you know that your defense hasn't really deterred Washington from doing anything today. You, at the very least, with doing that, give yourself a chance to take matters into your own hands and win the ball game. Not the other way around. But they had to get a score here, and they would not do that. Is Jared Goff, despite getting a few solid conversions here, would ultimately throw the game-sealing interception to Jeremy Chin, giving the Commanders a 45-31 lead. Now, multiple milestones would be at play for them here. The Commanders would make their first NFC Championship Game appearance since 1991, the very season they won the Super Bowl with the likes of Joe Gibbs, breaking the longest active streak in the NFL in terms of the championship game drought. Handing that label now over to the Cowboys, ironically enough. They are now the team with the longest active streak in terms of a championship game drought. The Commanders would also have yet another clean game this season, as coming into this game, Jayden Daniels himself was the only quarterback with multiple games in a season with no punts, no interceptions, and no turnovers at all, while maintaining a good amount of scoring. The only person to do that multiple times. They stated that some of the greatest quarterbacks, some of the people we regard to be the greatest quarterbacks of all time, had just one combined. We're talking about Brady, Brees, Peyton Manning, Mahomes, etc. Just all those guys had done it just one time combined. Joe Montana, just one time combined. It's wild stuff. He himself will have 299 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 71% completion here. The team as a whole would combine to rush for 182 yards and 4.3 yards per carry, deflating the football, taking every ounce of clock that they could to make it harder for the Lions to play their brand of football, which is similar. Both of these teams were ones with some of the better rushing attacks in the league. They were both in the upper echelon. So to force them to play one-dimensional was huge. De'Ami Brown would have 98 receiving yards on 6 catches, and Terry McLaurin would have 87 receiving yards on 4 catches. As for the Lions, despite them having 521 total yards of offense, turnovers ultimately made up the difference, along with the fact that they were worse on third down. A few penalties got in the way. 5 turnovers against a team that is red hot in protecting the football at all costs. You are going to put yourself in a detrimental position if you could not play effective football on your end. And surely enough, they failed to do that. Jared Goff would throw for 313 passing yards, a touchdown, and 3 interceptions on just 57.5% completion percentage. Their team as a whole would combine for 201 rushing yards on the ground with 3 total touchdowns. Amon-Ra St. Brown had 8 receptions for 137 yards in this one as well, with Jahmyr Gibbs adding 6 receptions for 70 yards, and of course Sam Laporta having 51 receiving yards on 6 catches and the only touchdown pass of the ball game. As I stated with this game as well, and again, I do believe that there could be some recency bias involved with it. But honestly, when you look at the numbers, when you look at it from an optical lens, it's not a bad thing to say that the Lions suffered the worst playoff loss I have ever seen from an optical lens. Gotta be honest here. I mean, for one, you look at it from the lens of a Lions fan. And I mean, they pan the camera over multiple times in the early portions of that fourth quarter and all throughout to fans just wallowing in tears and just in complete and total despair, in shock, in sorrow, in horror even at what they just witnessed in that game. And I can't blame them. Some have certainly gone on to be pissed off a little bit, because when you think about it, it is a good thing that the Lions, in their case, it's great to see that they're in contention again. That this is not something that was a fluke coming, off of last season. It's not like they declined or regressed in any way to their old selves. No, they elevated their game. This was the best season by record in their franchise history. Their first 1 seed of all time. Everything was supposed to be coming together for them. This was supposed to be their chance at getting in the Super Bowl. They've been waiting so long for this. There are people who are alive in that city who have not witnessed a competitive Lions campaign in the playoffs. There are people who have been alive in that city that have not truly gained any memory of one. I mean, they may know about it if they look back in, the history, but they don't truly remember a time like that because they were probably in their infancy at that point. And there are also those who are old enough in that city to have not witnessed a potential Super Bowl appearance and title, generally in terms of any sort of championship, in the past 70 years. Obviously, the one they secured in 1956 was before the Super Bowl era, but you get the point at this point. They've been waiting for such a long time, and to have it all seemingly come together and then just be completely eviscerated within the span of, I'll say, in terms of true game time. You look back at the start of the second quarter and then what they were able to do up until the start of the fourth quarter. I mean, they had them in a chokehold. And just like that, all of those dreams were snatched away from them. So it's definitely tough in that regard. You also have to stack this up against some of the other, historically bad playoff losses in this lens. Everybody has been referencing the 2019 divisional match between the Ravens and the Titans for the past few days following this defeat. And I do understand why they have done it to an extent. I mean, literally, you have them, a graphic for it, stating that the Lions are at the top of the list and the Ravens are tied for the second best team in terms of record to suffer a first round exit or a one-done deal after just a single game, with the Vikings of this very season also being tied for the second best team in terms of record to suffer that defeat. But the thing about that is that in 2019, this is Lamar Jackson that's in his first full season as a starter. Yes, he was the MVP, but there were naturally going to be some struggles there. Naturally. You can't have the expectation of all rookies being able to come in and just completely take the league by storm and also be able to capitalize on that with an AFC Championship or NFC Championship Game appearance or a Super Bowl appearance in their very first season. It's difficult to do. The talent level is at an all-time high at this point. There's no way that can be expected. Jayden Daniels, what Jayden Daniels is doing, and yes, his abilities to this point are off the charts. What he is doing right now is very historical. I get that. He does stand out as the exception, not the rule. But that being said, you don't see a lot of these success stories like that. On the other side of that, though, you have a Lions team that was better overall, yes, marginally so. But also, you're being led by a quarterback in Jared Goff, who has more overall experience in the league at this point when they've went on this campaign. He's been in the league since 2016. He certainly has the experience to play way better than he did. Not to mention, too, he's been on multiple playoff runs at this point over the course of his career. And he did over the course of a single one in 2018 with Sean McVay. He made the Super Bowl that season and managed to play one of the worst games by a starting caliber quarterback in a Super Bowl history, while also playing and taking part in the worst such Super Bowl game ever. Literally, because he got clamped up that badly by Bill Belichick's defense. Nonetheless, he has the experience to at least have a basic understanding of what to do in games like this and perform to a way better standard than he did. So that's why I say that he suffered, along with this team, the worst playoff loss from an optical lens in NFL history. And it could stand because, again, you don't see too many situations where 14-plus win teams are going out like this. Literally. Stat line for you right here. Jayden Daniels is the first ever rookie quarterback to beat a 14-plus win team in a playoff game. It doesn't happen. It may not happen ever again. But the fact that you are on the receiving end of that history in the worst possible way truly does not help your cause. And to add even more insult to injury, we know at this point that Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson have been getting multiple looks at multiple teams for potential head coaching spots. The roster may still be intact, though the goal for this offseason for the Lions should be getting reinforcements, because anytime your backups can have that much of a drop-off and perform that horribly, especially in the defensive end, you've got to search for some help somewhere. You can't keep on turning to random guys off the street. You've got to try to get some more free agents in, build through the draft even, develop some core players. They did try to do that with the likes of Ennis Rakestraw Jr., for example. See what you have in him. Give him a chance. But you can't expect to compete if you don't have a sense of depth, especially on the defensive side of the football. If that's what wins championships, you've gotta have the personnel ready to go. There's no excuse. But we'll see how those potential coach hirings shape up over the course of time. I guess the Lions just better hope that they don't go to a division rival, which they probably wouldn't allow. I just couldn't see that. Moving on to the Eagles-Rams game yesterday, and I mean, let's just put it like this, because I'd been saying it throughout the entire game, but when push comes to shove, a breakdown doesn't even really do it justice, per se. I could go play by play, but in reality, we understand what happened here. The Rams, for the most part, they played true to their strengths. They knew exactly what the game plan was to contain the Eagles' offense in this game. At multiple points in this game, they did a great job, and I mean a great job, of making life a living hell for Jalen Hurts back there. They did. Okay? You had Kobe Turner getting a sack. You had the rookie Jared Verse complaining in expressing his hatred for the Eagles fans, making them feel his presence with 2 sacks and 4 tackles, including 3 for loss on the game. You had Jordan McCullough with a sack as well. Neville Gallimore got a huge one. And Braden Fisk also got a huge one to combine for 7. They got the pressure they wanted to get on Jalen Hurts. And especially on that last drive, too, that the Eagles had before the Rams got it back with a chance to make something happen. The ability for Turner to get on Hurts back there and capitalize on a sort of gaffe from the Eagles was important. Their coverage was fine. You know, you weren't expecting Jalen Hurts to throw it much anyways, but there were some moments where, again, those sacks were, as a result of good pass coverage as well. There weren't, optimal reads on particular plays, and so Hurts was left with no other choice but to run the football or hold on to it for too long. They did a great job in terms of rushing the passer. I can't state that enough. And to be honest, when it comes to the Rams' offense as well, they, earlier on especially, did a fine job of trying to compete. They were able to get down the field on numerous occasions and wear down the Eagles' defense to an extent. But when push came to shove, turnovers were huge. Simply put, It's the case with every single game in the postseason. Turnovers were huge. Yes, Tyler Higbee was able to get things going with a 4-yard touchdown catch. They made it a 10-13 ball game to go into the second half. But we get to this fourth quarter, especially, where they go consecutive possessions here with fumbles. You get Kyron Williams having the ball punched out of his hands by none other than Jalen Carter, who was also a wrecking ball throughout the course of this game. And as much pressure as the Rams were able to get on Hurts, they managed to do that to Stafford throughout this game. Though he played a fine brand of football, he couldn't necessarily get the plays he wanted to make in the key moments because of that pressure by Jalen Carter, by Nolan Smith Jr. having another solid outing as well, and by Milton Williams up front too. You get this possession though, that led to a field goal. Again, credit to the defense there, because for a while as well, over this course of time, and even after yet another Rams possession that saw Matthew Stafford get strip sacked by Nolan Smith Jr. this time, and having it recovered by Zach Bond, even after all of that, in possessions where they needed to have it, they needed to make stops, they did. Because what ultimately sunk them was their coverage of Saquon Barkley throughout the course of this ballgame. Key to this game for this defense was going to be how they were able to mitigate Saquon Barkley's impact on the game. Quite literally, through and through. A man who led the league in rushing yards in the regular season, led the league in rushing yards before contact in the regular season, and that number is higher than some of the total amounts of rushing yardage from entire offenses. And not to mention that game earlier in the season where he, for all intents and purposes, killed the Rams defense, slaughtered them with multiple explosive plays that set the tone for the game and also capped off the game, not allowing the Rams any ounce of a chance to truly come back and win that one. They had to make sure to keep those plays to a minimum in this one. And honestly, for a while there, especially to start out the second half, it seemed as though the Rams had finally understood what they were doing in this regard. They were keeping Saquon Barkley's rushing attempts to a minimum, and they were even making him lose yardage to get the team as a whole behind schedule. But when push came to shove, despite the Rams' best efforts to try and make something happen on this 4th and 11 on the final play of their drive, to try and come back, even with the efforts of Puka in an earlier point on that drive, making a great catch on the sideline to give them life. Ultimately, this game was lost for the very reason that they suffered defeat in the first one. They allowed a 62-yard scamper from Saquon Barkley in the first quarter to set the tone for the rest of the game. And then, after a punt, it took a single play and another 78-yard run. This one, in the thick of snow falling down on the ground and sticking to the football field. In comes Saquon Barkley to save the day for the Eagles and give the Rams defense more nightmares to effectively end the game there. Even with everything else that happened. Though they made it interesting, they lost them right there as soon as it happened. No other way to say it. Straight up. So the Rams would again suffer defeat. Now, despite Matthew Stafford having 324 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 59.1% completion, despite Kyron Williams having 106 rushing yards, and despite Puka having 6 receptions for 97 yards, with DeMarcus Robinson also making some solid contributions, getting 74 yards on 3 catches, and Cooper Kupp getting 5 receptions for 61 yards, would ultimately be the Eagles coming out with a 28-22 victory. Now, the star player here is obviously Saquon Barkley. I mean, is that even a question? 26 carries, 205 yards for him, and 2 touchdowns, as he would set an all-time franchise record for rushing yards in a playoff game, and also forced the Rams to give up the second most rushing yards to a player in franchise history. That, of course, the first spot would be owned by Saquon Barkley as well with his game earlier in the season. And his 205-yard performance also made the Rams give up their first 100-yard rushing performance to a rusher in the playoffs. Make that over 200 now. Double it. Jalen Hurts would do most of his damage on the ground as well, opening up the scoring with a 44-yard rushing touchdown of his own, in which he broke the tackle attempt from Neville Gallimore, ironically enough, making them the first duo in quite some time with 40-plus yard rushing touchdowns, along with the San Diego Chargers players in Lincoln and Paul Lowe, to make that happen quite some years ago. There wasn't a lot to talk about in the passing game for the Eagles. They did try to hit A.J. Brown a few times, and they were misses. He did not have an optimal performance at all, just 2 catches for 14 yards. But he's progressing constantly, and I'm sure he's due for one. But it really just depends on the weather. As the Eagles secure this, they'll get the home game with a healthy Jalen Hurts this time next week. So we'll have to see what the forecast is, quite honestly. Because depending on that, it's truly undecided as to who could win this game right now. There's genuinely anything can truly happen on any given week. So we'll have to see. But you gotta love it, man. I mean, you would hope that DeMarcus Robinson isn't doing this given the context. But what I will say is that Rams defense definitely resorting to probably drinking away the pain right now. I ain't even gonna lie to you. He did them that bad. This season alone, they might have to take that. Giants fans and even different personnel as well are probably drinking away their pain. Again, there's no guarantee that the Giants would even make the playoffs with Saquon Barkley because they're that bad. We get that part. But you could have at least had the luxury of having your most popular player and star player still remain on your football team and keep him away from your division rival of all teams. Because now your division rival is fighting for a chance to be in yet another Super Bowl in this decade alone. And it's still been 13 years since your own Super Bowl appearance. At the very least, you wouldn't be trying to help them out by gifting them Saquon Barkley in a breadbasket. And that's exactly what you fucking did. That shit's gotta hurt. Got to hurt. It's not even like, again, watching First Take earlier, made a really good point, to be honest with you. This is happening instantly. This hasn't taken quite a while to develop. This is happening within just this year. of him being signed as a part of this roster. Just makes an embarrassing gaffe on the part of Joe Sean and the Giants front office even more laughable to this point. And now on to the final game of this slate for the divisional round. The highly anticipated matchup between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. It looked like the Bills had the Ravens dead to rights in the first half. Let's just be completely honest about that. And it was mostly because of the fact that the Ravens were shooting themselves in the foot. I mean, quite literally, this first drive couldn't have gone any better for them. You get Rashad Bateman, a touchdown from 16 yards out on a 3rd and 3, and it's looking like you're driving down the field relatively nicely. It looks like you're in the driver's seat. Then you just collapse. Defense was absolutely atrocious here. For them to be able to impose their will that much to where they're getting to the red zone on most of their trips in this half, while also being 3 of 3 in the red zone, scoring a touchdown on every drive that got down here, as Ray Davis and Josh Allen would get all of the rushing touchdowns in this ballgame. They didn't even have to do a really good job of throwing the football, relatively speaking, but they did enough to give themselves distance. And it also helped that, for whatever reason, instead of just giving the ball to Derrick Henry in these moments, Lamar Jackson wanted to take it upon himself to play hero ball. And I'm talking more specifically about the fumble that he had that gave the Bills a short field to work with and forced the Ravens, to dig themselves into an even deeper hole. There was just no reason to try to make something happen out of that. Even he would detail in his press conference that it was an RPO play and that you couldn't necessarily throw it to the player you were electing to give it to. So you just got to tuck it in at that point. Just hold on to it. It was crucial. I mean, they were driving on this one. You just got a solid catch from Anthony Miller of all wide receivers, and you don't compound on it. They were trying their hardest, though, and I guess it would work to an extent over the course of the rest of the game, to balance out Derrick Henry's rushing ability with Justice Hill's, and he got some explosive plays going, but I still feel as though, especially when the game was close, you know what Derrick Henry is capable of, and especially in the second half. So for him to have the output that he had in this game is just criminal, and it's essentially how the first game went. So from that aspect, you can look at the coaches and say that ultimately you screwed up there. I mean, quite literally, you haven't learned your lesson this entire season that feeding Derrick Henry is beneficial to your success, and vice versa. Like, for him to just have 16 rushes in this game, knowing what it ultimately turned out to be at this point, and what it ultimately turned out to be was a thriller, which you can credit to multiple things. Ravens' offense was a little cleaner, just a little cleaner, in the second half. I mean, you go down immediately after the defense as well, which also played stronger in the second half, got a very good start with the help of Nate Wiggins deflecting a pass to force a 3-and-out immediately. That led to a Ravens field goal as they're driving. And then Kyle Van Noy, I didn't know he had this in his bag, took it upon himself to get out in pass coverage at his age and make that tackle on the screen pass that had been so effective for them earlier on. Because granted, you're going to keep it short. You're not going to try to chuck the ball deep in this game, knowing that it's snowing out there and that it's windy as hell. You want to keep everything simple and straight to the point. You don't want to go out and play that kind of game. But the Ravens make that stop on that end. They did get it on this drive. They fed Derrick Henry, and subsequently enough, they scored. So you'd figure that on their next possession, after holding the Bills to a field goal, they'd want to keep that going. Instead, they give Derrick Henry just a couple runs, and they pass and pass and pass and pass. They get it out to Mark Andrews on a good one, but then he tries to do too much. And they fumble the ball, with Terrell Bernard being opportunistic and punching it out at the right time. Made him pay immediately for it, since you want to try to extend the play instead of getting down. Just a completely dumb decision. And it was looking like, again, it was going to be over. They took an immaculate amount of time off the clock, but the Ravens did finally manage to get Josh Allen down with the help of both Travis Jones and Ardarius Washington. They learned their lesson from the first half, though again, I still question the scheme there to have Ardarius Washington in the box trying to make a tackle on Josh Allen. Do you really think that is wise? I don't know. But anyways, they do get the stop. They hold them to a field goal. And now it's time for Lamar Jackson to truly show what the hell he's made of. It had been a long fight for Lamar Jackson in this one, to be completely honest. The start was fine from the very first drive. Then you had gaffes in the first half with the interception to Taylor Rapp and the aforementioned fumble that cost multiple possessions and multiple opportunities to score. Empty points left on the board. But you have a chance to redeem yourself now. One possession ball game. Got to make something happen. 88 yards. A long way to go. But it's not impossible. In this drive, I saw a quarterback, determined to go out there and win by any means. When push came to shove, he took it upon himself to step up and make the right plays at the right times. Extending different plays when he needed to. He made a good catch, or made a good crossbody pass over the middle to a streaking Tylan Wallace, who nearly fumbled it, but he got it back. That was great improv there. And then you get into the 2-minute warning. You continue to extend plays and make the right reads, getting it to Justice Hill and Mark Andrews before what I think, I'm not going to say it was the most important play of the game, but I think it was a very great play. The man stands in the pocket, tries to withstand the pressure, faces it a little bit, he scrambles out. And I believe, honestly, that a Lamar Jackson of let's just say 3 seasons ago even, he would have taken the opportunity there to scramble out of the pocket and try to go and pick up yardage for a first down. But this is a different Lamar Jackson, and he decided to be patient here. He scrambles out to get the lineman off his back, then gets right back in the pocket, maintaining poise, buying some time, and all of a sudden he throws the ball. And in comes Isaiah Likely sliding open over the middle of the field, catching the touchdown that could have tied up the ball game. All of a sudden, the Ravens have a chance to tie it up. Maybe it gets to overtime, depending on how things go. Though again, there's no telling. There's still an optimal amount of time left for the Bills to work with. But that's besides the point. You have a chance to tie it up. You're giving yourself a chance to win. And you're giving Lamar Jackson a great chance here to dispel all of the narratives around him here, especially with that play. Like, that shows a lot of growth on his end. And you know that not any quarterback is just capable of making that pass. He's really like that. That play was imperative, and he got it exactly at the moment he needed it. But you needed a 2-point conversion as well. You were still within 2. So in came Mark Andrews again, as they did a similar play to other 2-point conversions with him in the past. The infamous Steelers-Ravens game in, I believe, 2021 saw them run an exact play like that to Mark Andrews for a crucial 2-point conversion in that ball game. And similar to that one, he would drop it. And just like that, despite the Ravens working that hard, their season would end there with a 27-25 defeat at the hands of the Bills. Now, because there have been people for some reason, I don't know why people believe this, some people believe that Mark Andrews will be gone from the team with this. No. He is still a very important piece to this football team. You want him to activate his hands at that point. You know that he's capable of making this happen. But it's like, why do you at that time decide to crumble in that moment? It just does not make any sense. Like, a man that had 5 catches on the day, and also because akin to the play that the Bills rely on in short yardage situations with a QB sneak from the likes of Josh Allen, Ravens do a similar thing with Mark Andrews. A little bigger in terms of overall size and frame, and they put him in to take a snap, getting under the center as quickly as possible and running it for a first down on 4th down situations. And it has worked all the time. And they needed one in this game to extend a drive, which they got. Those plays are useful. So, of course, he's going to remain there. Without that, you can argue that they may not be able to truly put a dent in this thing. But it can also be stated that his just untimely gaffes in the second half did cost them. That's not to say that Lamar Jackson doesn't deserve any blame either. I mean, you do set the tone by doing similar things in the first half. And ultimately, if you protect the ball in those situations and capitalize on more favorable opportunities, then you may not find yourselves in this spot. That's reasonable to say. But when I look at this second half, literally, the Ravens are driving in this one, and there's a good chance that if you get down and take the yardage you got, you probably are able to start activating Derrick Henry now. You got 8 minutes and 43 seconds left at that point. You probably will be going with the rushing attack from there. Because again, they go to Derrick Henry a couple times on this drive. They get in Justice Hill for a run that gets negative yardage. And typically what they were doing throughout the entire game is just switching on and off. You were going to give Derrick Henry a couple carries at a time, and you were going to substitute in Justice Hill for a change of pace and allowing Derrick Henry to also catch his breath. He was probably coming in on the next play. That is something I will guarantee to you. Derrick Henry was going to come in for the next play on that possession. And they were going to start churning the football down the field with Derrick Henry. Now, I'm not going to say that he would get a large gain on the very first play that he got back in the ballgame. But what I can assure you is that there's a good chance that the Bills are put in a highly interesting situation. They would definitely not be afforded as much time to try to draw out the game and make sure that the Ravens were completely out of it. The Ravens would be on the offensive, putting the Bills that far into submission, even with them not having the lead at that point. But that's not how it panned out. And then again, 2-point conversion, though again, things still could have happened after that. But I don't know, all you want is a chance. Your defense was much stronger. The reason you forced them into a field goal is because your defense remained that stout in the red zone this time. You held them to just 6 points in the second half. They literally battled back all around. And yet, just was not meant to be, I suppose. So, the Ravens go out with yet another loss. You know, again, this is a fine game for Lamar Jackson. You can't necessarily say turnovers aside, but he did battle back when it mattered the most. And he should definitely get the credit for that. Turning 54 yards for him, 2 touchdowns, the interception and the lost fumble with 39 rushing yards on the ground on 72% completion. Derrick Henry had 16 rushes for 84 yards and a touchdown, while Justice Hill added 6 receptions for 50 yards. Isaiah Likely added 4 receptions for 73 yards and a touchdown. Rashad Bateman also had 4 receptions for 66 yards and a touchdown. Mark Andrews had 5 receptions for 61 yards. But dropped the one that mattered the most, really. And I know he's definitely feeling that at this point. Man who has accomplished so much with this team. To have the game end on that, it just sucks. It's terrible. But at the end of the day, you have to control the ball and you have to protect the ball. Now again, time of possession, Bills had a slight advantage, but again, 3 turnovers to absolutely none are glaring. To the defense, I say, yeah, you probably could have tried to force them into 1. I mean, when you look at Josh Allen's game, just 147 combined yards and 2 rushing touchdowns is not necessarily flashy, but it's productive, it's effective. The rushing game was solid, and they did enough to impose their will early and eventually maintain it throughout the rest of the game. Their defense was also opportunistic, putting their offense in favorable situations with short fields to then capitalize off of these turnovers from the Ravens. That's what it comes down to. So, the championship games are set. Chiefs and Bills, part 4 in the playoffs. And also, part 3 of the Commanders and Eagles this very season in the NFC. Should be very interesting. Very, very interesting. There were other developments from the week leading up to this particular round, though. To start out, the Browns would promote Tommy Rees in-house to their new offensive coordinator position. As, again, I think anything could be better, like anything is better than finishing dead last in offensive rating. Anything. If you can do that and improve drastically from that point, I mean, oh my gosh, like if you're at least a top 17 or so offense, that's good enough. The Texans would release Diontae Johnson again, and the Ravens would pick him back up again. That didn't end up having an effect on the game, though. Wasn't involved at all. The Cowboys would be set to interview Robert Saleh, and they would also request to interview Kellen Moore and also Seahawks defensive coordinator Leslie Frazier. Obviously, we know that current Eagles OC Kellen Moore was the offensive coordinator for the Cowboys before Mike McCarthy got there and wanted so desperately to take over play calling. Robert Saleh is also an interesting decision. I would just hope that they try to give him the benefit of the doubt, because the Jets certainly didn't. Jim Harbaugh stated that he would need a heart procedure and hip replacement over the course of the offseason. Obviously, he suffered a heart issue that forced him out of an earlier game this season, and they had it checked out. They want to make sure that everything's going right with that. And if something is off, they want to get that fixed, certainly. They also understand that, I guess, different things are starting to fall off when you get a little older, so hip replacement also makes sense. He wants to make sure that he can continue moving around in the way that he does. The Jets would express their interest in interviewing Jeff Hafley from the Packers and also OC Bobby Slowik from the Texans. The Titans would hire general manager Mike Borgonzi. He was most recently the assistant general manager for the Kansas City Chiefs over the earlier portion of this decade, and we've seen the success that they've had over this time. There's no doubt in my mind that he's had a part in that. And there's no doubt in my mind that he's probably learned the talk of the trade over the course of the years serving under Brett Veach, who, again, has done a very great job over the past few seasons in the front office. The Falcons hired former Jets defensive coordinator and interim head coach Jeff Ulbrich. He was actually in Atlanta before in 2020 before taking the Jets job. So I guess it's just a full circle moment. They need somebody. The Jets were probably not considering bringing him back. So I guess you just go to where you're familiar. The Bears would be set to interview former Oilers running back and Tennessee State head coach Eddie George. Now, he had a successful season with Tennessee State this season, from what I am aware of. And I do, to an extent, understand it, but it would be great. Don't get me wrong. It would be very great to get a head coach of minority in that position. But it could also be detrimental to put a head coach of minority in that position. The Bears are not necessarily a good place to start out your NFL coaching career. Let's just be completely honest as a head coach. And Eddie George has certainly played the game, but even with guys that they're looking into right now for the Bears, like Ben Johnson, for example, he's been with an NFL staff for years, and George's experience is mostly at the college level right now. Though, again, since his retirement, he has over a decade of experience, I believe, in the college football scope of things. But it's quite the move to make, is all. So you have to try to get a gauge to see exactly how he would handle getting a rookie, well, not rookie, but a young quarterback like Caleb Williams? Do we know if he's an offensive-minded head coach? Okay, not even close to a decade. Whoa. All right. He has been good for them, though. He has a winning record at Tennessee State. He's been there since 2021. This has been his most successful season. There's a chance that it could happen, but again, to try to handle a young quarterback and a roster that is inept in a few places would be a hard ask for any head coach, let alone one just getting started out in the NFL as a whole in any sort of level of coaching. So we'll have to see about it. It should be interesting, though. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.